right, so it's no longer just vague anxiety and worrying about activist investors. Oasis Management has officially escalated things. The activist hedge fund, now one of Katakawa's largest shareholders, has reportedly submitted a shareholder proposal demanding the removal of Katakawa's CEO, Takeshi Natsuno, ahead of the company's annual shareholder meeting. Again, Katakawa is the parent company of FromSoftware. FromSoftware's, I think, their largest division. And a lot of FromSoftware fans like myself are already nervous about the direction of the company after Nightring, Dustblood's multiplayer pivots, Nintendo exclusivity, and the ongoing silence around their next traditional single-player RPG, which we don't even know if they're working on one right now. I'm sure they are, but we have no confirmation. This news is only going to intensify those concerns. So before we panic, let's separate the facts from the doom posting because the situation is complicated. Who is Oasis Management? If you didn't catch my prior video, I'll go ahead and link it, but that'll give you a little more backstory. Basically, Oasis is not some random investor just holding their shares in the background. They're what's known as an activist investor. That means they buy large stakes in companies, specifically with the idea to pressure management into making changes so that they can increase shareholder returns. And by shareholder returns, I mean theirs. And usually they're doing this for short-term returns. They're not looking for long-term returns. They want immediate money to repay their investment. Some gamers remember them for one reason in particular, which I covered in the prior video. Just quickly, Oasis became infamous after pushing Nintendo towards a more aggressive mobile monetization strategy, including comments that became associated with the idea of charging players for enhanced jumps in Mario Mobile. They also said that they suggest Nintendo stop producing consoles altogether. Shows how short-term this side is, because if you look at like Switch 2 sales, although I still think it's a big mistake for Dustbloods to be exclusive, it's sold very well. So if they'd have listened to them, they'd have been completely invested in the mobile market, and it's not what people thought it was 10 years ago. When FromSoftware fans like myself heard that Oasis had acquired 9% of Katakawa and then raised it immediately to 10%, and then after a short bidding war with Sony, all the way to 13.76, almost 14%, making them the single largest shareholder, alarms started going off in some people's heads, mine included. One reason this is so worrying is because it's happening during one of the most fragile moments, in my opinion, FromSoftware has had with its core audience in years. Since Elden Ring, the company's release roadmap has increasingly drifted away from what many of the more core fans originally fell in love with. Armored Core 6, while a great game, appealed to a more niche audience compared to their Souls games, and Sekiro, Bloodborne, their action RPGs, which I'll just refer to here on as Soulsborne games. If you don't know that term, that's what I'm going to be referring to. And everyone knows Armored Core is part of their original, makeup and DNA. In fact, as a child, I had a PlayStation 1 and Armored Core 1. I played the crap out of it, and I remember, I couldn't get very far. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was probably 10 years old, but I even remembered that logo. So when I, all these years later, got into Dark Souls, like I even recalled, oh yeah, that's the company that made. So I know that's part of their DNA, but again, they made their name really in the modern era with their Dark Souls, Bloodborne, their Soulsborne games. After Armored Core 6, which again, I think not a lot of people probably had a problem with after Elden Ring and several Soulsborne games prior. Then they went to Night Rain, which leaned heavily into multiplayer systems. There was a lot of people worried about that. It turned out okay. It's kind of a okay-ish game. I had fun with it last year, but I'm not repeatedly going back to it. I mean, I've got gameplay footage here, but it's just something that I do when I'm bored every now and then. I can't play it for hours and hours on end, a year later. And then Dustbloods, which shocked people because it appeared to deliver the gothic Bloodborne style aesthetic fans have begged for like 10 years at this point, only to reveal the pivot into PvPvE extraction style gameplay, which is tied to a Nintendo exclusive platform. So now There's ongoing speculation that Project FMC may be an Armored Core related spin off title rather than a traditional dark fantasy single player RPG, a Soulsborne game many fans are kind of desperately waiting for. I mean, Elden Ring was over 4 years ago at this point, and for them to go 4 years without even announcing another action RPG Soulsborne game is kind of unprecedented. If you look from Demon Souls all the way to Elden Ring, the most we ever waited from release to release was 3 years. We're at 4 years now with no announcement. So the earliest we could look at now is probably 6 years between titles, which is kind of crazy, especially after Elden Ring and all the success and everything. That's what brought all the new players in, and then they just kind of doing something else after feels odd. So, from the perspective of their longtime fans, especially the ones that came around in the Soulsborne era, this Oasis situation is not happening in a vacuum. It's colliding with and exacerbating an already existing fear that FromSoftware is slowly being pushed away from the identity that made them legendary. So let's go ahead and talk about the demand letter itself. According to Japanese reporting, Oasis criticized Katakawa leadership over declining EPS, weak ROE, weakening publishing and IP creation performance, and what they described as a failure to fully capitalize globally on FromSoftware success. Last part in there is the key sentence, because when activist investors start talking about fully utilizing a globally successful gaming property, what people immediately have come to their mind is live service, aggressive monetization, mobile expansion, annualization, subscription models, and corporate optimization. This is especially true after the broader gaming industry has already spent years chasing live service trends, which really started after Fortnite, often destroying studios in the process. If you want a few examples, look at BioWare, Bungie, Bethesda, lesser so. I mean, there's tons, EA, tons and tons of horror stories about games that they spent hundreds of millions of dollars on, never even released or turned into total crap. But we've watched these legendary developers burn goodwill, trying to transform successful single player identities into endlessly monetized ecosystems. And that's why this story feels so emotionally charged to From Software fans like myself. From Software is already one of the last major studios still associated with artistic integrity first and monetization second. Their games feel authored, complete, focused. They resist trend chasing, and many fans like myself are terrified of them losing that. Now, here's the important part to consider. Kadokawa, so far at least, has publicly pushed back. The company reportedly stated that its management policies are not influenced by the actions of individual shareholders, even as Oasis became recently its largest shareholder, like less than a month ago. Kadokawa's board has also opposed already the Oasis proposal to remove Natsuno, who is the CEO. And this matters because Japanese corporate culture traditionally resists aggressive activist intervention, which is more common in American corporations, but it happens there as well. They just are a little more resistant to it. So, despite having influence, they do not outright control Kadokawa, yet at least. And that distinction is important. But right now, there is no evidence that Oasis directly controls From Software development decisions, although they do have the biggest say. No evidence that Miyazaki is currently being forced into changing his ideas, his games he's working on, adding microtransactions, anything like that. But it does signal increased pressure for higher growth, pressure for stronger global monetization, pressure for faster expansion of IP, pressure to extract more value from Software's success. And honestly, that pressure alone may be already enough to really worry fans, especially because many players already feel the company's recent trajectory has become increasingly corporate compared to the Souls era identity that really built the fan base. Now let's talk about the newly released investor report as well. One of the biggest takeaways is that Katakawa clearly sees games, and especially FromSoftware, as one of its most valuable global growth engines moving forward. That's great news. It means FromSoftware is more important than ever internally, but it also means the studio is becoming more central to shareholder expectations and revenue growth discussions. And historically, that's exactly when creative tension begins at entertainment companies. Bigger something gets, the harder it becomes to leave it alone. That's a crossroads that we are approaching. The optimistic interpretation is that Katakawa simply wants to expand FromSoftware carefully while preserving its creative DNA, and the pessimistic interpretation is that shareholders see FromSoftware as an undermonetized gold mine. And in the past, they've pretty much left them alone. So we're hoping that they'll do that, but they are talking about they're wanting to. From Software's grown at this point to where it is the biggest moneymaker that they have, from what I can tell. And it's just going to be more scrutinized going forward. And if fans are being honest, knowing that the recent multiplayer pivots have already made that second possibility feel less impossible than it once did. There's one thing fans should remember before spiraling completely, though. Miyazaki and From Software have earned an enormous amount of trust, more than probably any studio in gaming, which is why I'm making this video. And despite the anxiety right now, there still is no indication currently the studio has abandoned single player dark fantasy RPGs permanently. The silence is definitely frustrating, the direction is uncertain, and the optics are definitely concerning, but we're not at a point where From Software has fundamentally betrayed what made them special. The fear right now is mostly about long-term trajectory and whether Oasis's growing influence accelerates a shift that we were kind of already nervous about. If the next major announcements continue moving away from traditional single-player Souls style experiences, then the shareholder drama is going to become much more than just business news. It'll become symbolic of something larger. The fear that one of gaming's last truly uncompromising studios is slowly being pulled into the same corporate gravity that's consumed so much of the industry already. And that's why the next video I'm going to bring you is going to be about Project FMC, what news I can collate and find on it. And I want to talk to you a little bit about why I think it's really important, what type of game it is, and what I think it is, which we've got pretty good indicators. So I'm already working on that video that should be out real soon. Thanks for watching this. This was just a kind of a news update with From Software. We had the new investor report, and then we had our first big move from Oasis, the new head owners at Katakawa, and they're From Software. So anyways, guys, I appreciate you watching. Please check out my channel. It's Sweaty Zeus. I don't monetize my videos, so if you could just leave a like and sub or hype the video, that's kind of all I look for. And as long as I keep, getting some interaction from people, I'm good. I don't need the monetization. I'm not worried about it. But I really just do this because I love games and love talking to you guys and seeing what you think. So let me know what you feel like in the comments below, and hope to see you around in the future.